Well, welcome to our discussion on scaling evidence-based EdTech in post-secondary education, hosted by the Postsecondary Teaching with Technology Collaborative. I'm Jessica Mislevy, and I'm a research director with SRI Education and a co-PI on the collaborative. I'm joined by John Gamba and Jason Palmer, who, from an investor perspective, will reflect on unique opportunities and challenges for EdTech developers looking to enter and scale in this market. So John is an entrepreneur in residence and director of innovative programs at Catalyst at Penn GSE. He has founded, funded, and led several education ventures, including PACE, a school-to-home communications network used by thousands of schools and millions of parents nationwide, and Massive U, a social learning platform used by the largest textbook providers. And Jason is an EdTech entrepreneur, executive, and investor who currently serves as general partner at New Markets Ventures Partners, one of the nation's leading education-focused venture capital firms. He previously served as deputy director at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, leading post-secondary innovation efforts to improve the outcomes of historically marginalized college students. So I'd like to start by asking Jason to highlight some of the unique aspects of the market landscape for EdTech products in post-secondary education.
Great. Thanks so much, Jessica. And thanks for having us. So the higher education space is ripe for lots of innovation right now. Many professors are being super creative about adopting education technology, courseware, study tools, interactives. This is probably the most active that I have seen the market in the 20 years that I've been investing. But there are some weird eccentricities in the market that you need to understand if you're going to be an EdTech entrepreneur or developer in this space. The number one thing that people don't usually grasp right away is that the most important customers to get are large online universities. So think Arizona State University, Western Governors University, Southern New Hampshire University. We're now tracking that there actually are more than 35 universities with more than 50,000 students. And most of those universities are predominantly online, even if they have a pretty large on-ground presence. And it kind of makes sense. If you have an education technology, you're probably going to be adopted first in an online setting. However, a lot of entrepreneurs went to an on-ground setting and may not realize how vibrant that online and blended learning space is. So that's the first thing, is go after those online universities. At Arizona State University, Dr. Crow is extremely creative in the way he runs that university. Every professor is allowed to make their own decisions. Departments are allowed to make their own decisions. They have a very robust group called Ed Plus that has 200 people that work with EdTech entrepreneurs. They run all kinds of accelerators. They will love you when you come in with your new technology, and they'll try to help you get matched up with the right professor. It's very similar at Western Governors University. They have WG Labs. They have Juo, which is an investment arm, and many of the faculty are extremely creative. Southern New Hampshire is a little bit more centralized in their operations. But they also welcome all entrepreneurs to come to campus, to show their wares, to test out things in various classes. Those are really the three universities that you most want to get as one of your first 10 universities. But expect that you're going to go to a lot of universities that you don't know the name of at the beginning, but are also highly online in the community college sector or the public university sector among your first 10 clients. I'll pause there for now. There's so much more I could say.
Well, thanks, Jason. Really important to share about that range of institution types in higher ed to be cognizant of, and the importance of those online colleges for early market adopters for the potential to scale. John, what are your thoughts on this? I know you've shared thoughts about users and buyer personas in the post-secondary space and how those might differ from those seen in K-12.
Yeah, I think Jason just hit the nail on the head. It's really important, critical actually, to really understand your buyer personas and your user personas. And it is very different in K-12 versus post-secondary. In K-12, you're used to presenting products and services where institutions, districts, principals, schools are making buying decisions on behalf of students. Whereas in the higher ed post-secondary world, in some cases, buying decisions are being made by students in some cases. I think that Jason really hits it in terms of having anchor tenant clients from some of the most recognized universities using your product and service. And I think investors like Jason is going to favor education entrepreneurs who really understand the key dynamics of those buyer and user personas. So very different landscape, different decision-making dynamics, but absolutely agree with Jason. Having a couple of your anchor tenants from some of those recognized universities is critically important.
So now that we've gotten a little better sense of the landscape we're talking about in post-secondary education, what are some of the unique challenges that you've observed for EdTech developers and entrepreneurs in this sector?
So I'll just go first on this one. And that is, I think once you get past or once you have an understanding of those buyer and user personas, really understanding how decisions are made in each of these landscapes is also critically important. In K-12, when you're making a presentation to a school district, district cabinet level person, you kind of know, because they're pretty much published, the strategic plans that have been published by those school districts, and you know the cycles by which decisions are made. In the higher education space, in my experience in working with education entrepreneurs, those decisions are more decentralized in a lot of ways. Universities are allowing, as Jason just mentioned, the professors to make the purchase decisions based on the dynamics of each of those products. So you have to get to know not only the dynamics of the university, ASU is very different from the University of Pennsylvania, but also the way that professors and instructors are making decisions on the kinds of product and services that they're purchasing in a lot of cases on behalf of their students.
John, may I ask you to elaborate a little bit on one of the points about faculty as decision makers in post-secondary education relative to potentially students being your buyers? What have you seen about products in this space that might try to target direct to students versus direct to faculty consumers?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And for a long time in working with education entrepreneurs, we talk about professors as rock stars. How are professors actually utilizing content, putting their name on content, making decisions on how content is being used by actual students? And what can you do as an education entrepreneur to advance that notion of the professor being a rock star? They like to have their name on things. They like to have influence in how decisions are made in terms of the content, the pedagogy, the instruction that's being disseminated out to their students. So whatever you can do as an education entrepreneur to allow the professor to potentially author content or publish content or put their name on the content that's being put out there, I think is a unique dynamic that isn't seen in the K-12 world.
I think important for folks to remember too that often students in that post-secondary contents are tight with finances in terms of being able to purchase products and kind of age out of that user market fairly quickly too.
Yeah, and you have to remember also in K-12, you've got a whole dynamic of those who are younger than 18 years old who are not, in a position to actually purchase products. Their parents have to make it. And then the key stakeholders in the K-12 world also come into play, parents, whereas in the higher ed, when you're older than 18, students are able to make purchase decisions themselves, and they're not as much reliant on the other key stakeholders that are in the K-12 space.
Thank you. Jason, your thoughts, any challenges that seem unique to this post-secondary space that you have observed for EdTech developers?
Yeah, it's really hard to figure out how to answer this question in a tight way, but there are many nooks and crannies in the post-secondary space. And so, for example, you might be a company that started out with an innovation in developmental education. If you were in community colleges, say, and lots of students are coming to community colleges and they need to take developmental education courses, and maybe that's where you started. Or maybe you're a company that invented a simulation and you're being adopted in physics programs. Or maybe you're someone that invented something that's used to collect psych data for psychological experiments. You have to think about which discipline are you in? How big is that discipline? How do faculty in that discipline make a decision? Could your solution actually be cross-discipline? So for example, if you're a solution for all of STEM, that's better than just being good for physics, for example. And then, in STEM, 73% of the students are actually in the T. They're in the technology, computer science, IT areas as well. So STEM is not, all letters are not equal in STEM. Another area where a lot of innovations get started is in the business area. There are a lot of students that take business courses in colleges across the United States. So there's so many things if you think about the disciplines, the intervention, and then who your initial buyers are. But the one other thing I want to mention is the networks. So you want to get involved with the right network. And that could be the math professors annual conference if you're in math, or that could be something like ATD, Achieving the Dream, if that's your group of universities or colleges that you're going to work with first. Or it could be WICHE, which is a Western States, which is a pretty innovative set of colleges and universities. Or it could be the UIA, University Innovation Alliance. And honestly, I could go on and on and on. There are about 50 associations, and usually your first faculty or university adoptees, you'll be able to ask them, like, are you part of an association? Do you do an annual conference? And then you want to go to that conference and you don't want to do the demo on stage. You want this faculty member who's your raving early adopter to be the one that demos it on stage so that everybody else can see the potential of the education technology. So find your discipline, crush it, get the right professors who are the ones that are, going and leading the discipline by going to that annual conference every year.
Well, thank you, Jason. I was interested to hear from you both about some of those strategies that have been successful to break through some of those barriers or challenges in the post-secondary space. And certainly getting in with the right networks is really an important tip, those alliances, associations, and conferences. John, do you have any others to add when you think about tips for breaking into this market?
Yeah, I think that it's becoming more and more important for education entrepreneurs, especially in post-secondary, to recognize that it's not only instruction that is important in post-secondary, but a lot of other things that are representing pain points for universities and colleges. There's safety and security applications. There's mental health, which is a hair on fire challenge. There is career connectedness and making sure, and there are a whole vast list of entrepreneurs who are thinking about competing in the post-secondary space outside of the, math, STEM, physics, and in other areas of post-secondary that require you to think about networks and think about who the decision makers are and who to think about, how you're going to present a value proposition that's centered around efficacy. If you're in a math, if you're delivering a math product or if you're delivering a physics product, the underlying research to demonstrate efficacy in that area may be different than if you're presenting a weapons detection software solution that is going to preserve safety and security in a post-secondary environment. So the pain points are changing. The way decisions are made is changing. All of this compounds the challenges as an EdTech entrepreneur for how you're going to approach this market, bring it to market, and then hopefully sustain your business inside of that market over time.
John makes a really good point that I want to build on there for a second, is that, I was even guilty of the thinking of EdTech as being instructional related or study related in some of my earlier answers, but probably 75% of the revenue actually comes from what we would call infrastructure tools. Think of learning management systems, voting mechanisms, tools to improve retention of students and student success, financial aid application tools, enrollment management tools. There's so many aspects of the university that need to be digitized and are being digitized. And it's 3/4 of the folks who may be listening to this are probably in that infrastructure tools category. And your market is inherently bigger because you cross all disciplines, for one thing. And then secondly, you don't have to kind of weave yourself into the flow of instruction, which is very, very difficult, actually. The more you can be kind of instruction agnostic or not trying to change the way professors do their work, make professors' lives easier, make schools' lives easier. That's the key.
Thank you. Well, that transitions well to my next question around the kinds of evidence that customers seek to determine whether these products are effective and a good fit in their context. I know you've both spoken previously about the importance of aligning to a need or a pain point that folks have. And then we have different kinds of evidence around maybe the efficacy of a product, but other things like usability, feasibility, interoperability. Would you like to share a bit more about what you've heard as some of those big questions that folks have as they're thinking about purchasing a product in the EdTech space?
Yeah, this is a big one. This is what we consider our secret sauce in providing a lot of mentorship to education entrepreneurs here at Catalyst at Penn GSE. And that is really this focus on evidence and evidence of effectiveness as a EdTech or an education product is brought to market. And we think about it through two lenses. First, we really challenge the entrepreneur to think about their theory of action and their theory of change, and what the underlying or the foundational research that's being used, and can they cite that research that's being used to substantiate their value proposition. For example, we're now hearing a lot of AI and how machine learning is really impacting the space. And somebody who is working in that space may want to come and say, start with Benjamin Bloom's 2 sigma problem, which says that there's 2 standard deviations of improvement if one-to-one tutoring is provided to a student, especially an underrepresented student. So if somebody's coming out with the latest and greatest AI tool and they can start showing how that impacts the 2 sigma problem and provide mastery or competency or deeper learning as a result of that tool, that's a pretty good a benchmark on what they're going to use as they're trying to substantiate their value proposition. The second part of that is their evaluative model. And you talked about feasibility and usability and even interoperability. And we like to ask through the lens of quantitative and qualitative evaluation, how are you measuring the impact over time? Are you raising test scores? Are you able to show that formative assessments are improved as a result of putting that instructional tool in place? And we just talked about things that are outside of instruction, infrastructure. Can you actually prove that students are safer? Students are mentally healthier. Students are more career connected if they're using specific products and services. And how are you measuring that clearly over time? The more you can do that well, using underlying research and an evaluative model, and able to demonstrate that to people like Jason Palmer, you're going to have a better chance of being able to secure financing at the right stages.
Thank you. Jason, would you like to share how EdTech investors think about evidence of effectiveness and some of these other types of evidence in your investment decisions, and maybe how the focus on research and evidence has changed over the past decade?
Definitely. I'm tempted to just say +1 to everything that John just said, because he's so, I felt like that we're of the same mind. And I'm glad that you're mentoring everybody in the Catalyst programs exactly that way. If I go back 10 years ago, most of the education technology companies that we met, well, we would ask them, what evidence is your solution based upon? And, what's the quantitative results that you've achieved? They would look at us with kind of a blank stare, and say, are we focused on the revenue growth here and trying to become profitable? And we had to kind of teach them that, no, there is actually like a whole research base of what works. You need to partner with researchers. You need to look at, are you going to do kind of cohort level analysis to decide whether your tool is effective? Or can you actually do an experimental group and a control group? Like, how are you going to actually figure out if your solution is actually working? And then, when we make investments, we look very closely and we do calls with the major customers to say, why did you buy this product? What would be success for this product? And we listen super carefully. Do they have an answer that's quantitative? Is it actually a mission critical function of learning or of the business? And do they know what success would be? And a lot of times, interestingly, and I think this applies to a lot of industries, when you ask a big customer, what would success be for this solution that they just spent $1 million on or $10,000 on, it really doesn't matter on the price. They don't know. And they kind of have to invent it on the fly and listen to their thought process of how they would measure the success of that. Is it, 5% more students choose to major in STEM, or 10% more students re-enroll for the subsequent semester, or financial aid applications are processed in 48 hours instead of 48 days. Like they kind of make up numbers along the way, and they make up a logic model, and understanding that logic model is super important. So if there's one thing I could recommend to all of you, is that you go and contact your top customers after they've been working with you for a little while, and you ask them those same questions and listen to that thought process, because that'll help you figure out, how do I maximize the impact of my solution? And then what should I be researching? Because it might take 6 months to 2 years to do a research project to figure out, are we actually impacting positively those quantitative numbers that our customers are going to grade us on down the road.
Yeah, and I'll build on that to say that the answers don't always have to come fast. The power of iteration, the power of co-construction, the power of co-creation. Just sitting with the engineering team of Khan Academy, it was really interesting to hear about how their new AI-driven virtual assistant or teaching assistant came about, Khanmigo. And it wasn't just a bunch of engineers coming into a room and saying, this is a really cool technology leveraging the power of ChatGPT and OpenAI. They actually went to the labs, the Khan labs in Mountain View, and sat down with students and co-constructed and asked them, what do you find most useful of this teaching assistant? And it was really interesting that the feedback was not so much, oh, I learned math or I learned physics faster. It was, I learned the implications behind what I was learning. I was able to do math faster instead of learn math faster. So the button, why was this important, came out as being something that was supremely valuable as a part of that product. So I would say research practice partnerships are important. I would say the power of iteration and co-construction with the stakeholders, both the buyers and the users, being in the room as you're iterating on software or on the products or services are being made, are critically important. And most investors will ask, what is the process by which you navigated your logic model and you ultimately came to this conclusion that you want us to invest in?
Well, this is really helpful. I think we'd be interested to unpack a little bit more. Research practice partnerships are one great example, but ways that developers and entrepreneurs can engage with educators or the end users of their product, as well as researchers, so that they really can produce these products that are effective and a good fit with needs. Are there any other examples of ways that you've worked with researchers or educators in product development, or encourage those entrepreneurs and developers in the different parts of their product development lifecycle?
Sure. So you definitely, it's a little bit going back to what I said earlier, but if you go to those conferences I was mentioning before, and the conferences specific to your discipline, look for the education researcher who is at that conference, who is trying to teach the EdTech companies, here's what the research is, here's how it works. And they'll be a rock star like John is talking about. They'll be one of the headliner people, or they'll be the faculty member who is on a panel who, seems to know much more than everybody else, because maybe they've been doing this for 10 or 20 years and they might have helped multiple companies be successful. So a lot of it is finding those people. But the craziest thing is you can, look online, you can do your own Google Scholar research, you can find somebody who's researching your domain. And if you just reach out to them by email, they may be tickled pink that somebody actually is working on an EdTech product in their area. They might want to work with you. And then right away, you have that iterative partner like Jessica was talking about. It's much easier to partner with faculty than it seems just by reaching out. Or you may find sorry, I can't partner with you. I'm already working with this other company that does XYZ. And then you look and see, what is company XYZ doing? And maybe you don't want to start a new company. Maybe you want to join and be the co-founder of company XYZ, because that person's a whole year ahead of you. And that's a lot of times how people find co-founders and decide not to start companies, because they jump on board something that's already been researching and working in that area for a year or two. So those are a couple things that come to mind.
Yeah, we sat on a panel together at EdGames Expo, which is IES, EdMets, and we're real big fans of the SBIR programs. And I'd say that SBIRs, whether it's NSF, IES, NIH, DoD, they really value this idea of research to practice and evidence of effectiveness. And they provide insight on who some of the best researchers in various disciplines are that you should reach out to. And that research, as part of your logic model, has to be embedded in non-dilutive grant proposals that have a chance of winning, right? It's not easy to secure grant funding, but in my experience, especially through the SBIR programs, it's the ones that are really rooted in research, have good footnotes, are really leveraging the underlying research as well as the evaluative models that are being put forth, have the best chance of securing funding through those various programs.
And to just give a few numbers on that, we've seen lots of entrepreneurs get $250,000 to $750,000, maybe even a couple $1 million grants from SBIR. It is a great way to get the initial development off the ground when you're in the R&D stage. Yeah, it's very hard, almost impossible to raise money from investors like myself. If you have $0 in revenue, but you have a great logic model and you have a great research foundation, that's when you definitely go to SBIR for your initial funding. If you win the competition, you get $250 to $750 to build out what you've been doing, to get your initial 5 or 10 kind of pilot customers in place. That is a very common starting point for many EdTech entrepreneurs, a really great one.
And it's a notch, right? When investors look and see that you've been funded with an SBIR phase 1 or an SBIR phase 2 or a direct to phase 2 SBIR, that's instant credibility because they're no nonsense. They really do a lot of vetting. Not a lot of people win. In fact, Jason, I don't know if you could validate this, but it tends to be, from what I hear, about 80-20 and then 20-80. 80% of those who apply for an SBIR phase 1 don't get it, 20% do. And then once you get in, if you apply the principles, iCore customer discovery and some of the other programs inside, then it flips. It becomes a lot easier to get phase 2 once you actually get in there. But they're super judicious, and investors like to see that you've passed that gate of securing non-dilutive capital before going to the venture routes.
I can definitely validate that. And, it's just anecdotal from my own experience on 3 SBIR review committees. 2 out of the 9 proposals, all 3 times, got the initial grant. And then when I looked back later, all of those grantees, so more than 80%, actually got a subsequent grant if you follow basically the whole SBIR kind of training program and deliver on time, exactly what you said you were going to do. It's also worth mentioning that, there's a chasm there too. Like, you start out in research mode, then you have to get into kind of building a company mode in the same time frame. And so I published an article on EdTech Digest a couple months ago where I wanted to pull together all the seed stage investors in EdTech. We work with a lot of seed stage investors. I thought there would be maybe 50 or 100 people that I consider friends in the space. This would take like a month to put these names on paper and create a little database. Turns out there are 700 EdTech seed stage investors. So I published the whole list online as part of that article. Includes their email addresses, although you do have to kind of like type in your information to get behind the paywall to get access to the email addresses. You don't have to pay any money. You just have to type in your name. And I still am getting emails every week of people who say, hey, you left me off that list. So now I have 701, 702. There's a lot of people that love investing in EdTech who can help you either post or concurrent with the SBIR phase.
Thank you. Thank you for raising that particular grant opportunity for small business innovation research, or the SBIR program. And those type of grants do have structure to the research that's part of, there's one arm that's really focused on the commercialization and scale planning, and another arm focused on the research. looking at some of those aspects we've talked about today around usability, feasibility, and early evidence of efficacy or promise to really improve those outcomes you're seeking to improve. Well, as we wrap up, are there any last thoughts or things we haven't had a chance to touch on that you would encourage developers and entrepreneurs to keep in mind as they're starting on their journey to break into the post-secondary education market?
Yeah, I'll throw one up and I'll set up Jason, if I may. And that is, he's probably going to share how many proposals, how many business plans, how many lean canvases, how many inquiries he's seen, and how many actually get funded. And it sometimes can feel daunting. And I get a lot of early stage, pre-seed all the way to seed plus, before they get to Jason, ask, how can I distinguish myself? How can I stand out? Because they're so judicious in how they're making their funding decision. And I'd say that there's probably 3 non-negotiables that if you go 1 for 3, 2 for 3, you may have a shot, but you really should be thinking about 3 for 3. And one is, not to oversimplify, but to kind of cut right to the chase, engagement. The EdTech product, the education process, has to be super engaging. Points, rewards, leveling up. Great usability, great UI, great UX. If it's not super engaging and it falls flat, students aren't going to want it, and it's never going to pass muster. 2 is pedagogically aligned, and we go back to evidence of effectiveness. There's got to be some sort of a crosswalk to a standard or some way of absolutely showing that there's a measurable impact that's delivered as a result of consuming that product or service. And then 3rd is the ease of adoption. And that gets into things like interoperability, LTI Advantage, and some other ways of making sure that there's single sign-on. Teachers, instructors, administrators are time-starved. They don't have time to learn new products and services. So the more you make it easy to adopt, the better the chance you have. If you can really go 3 for 3, super engaging, a Fortnite experience or a Minecraft experience, pedagogically aligned, you know that it crosswalks and shows that there's an impact, and super easy to adopt with basic professional learning that an instructor or an administrator will know how to use it to improve instruction or improve operations within their ecosystem, maximizing your chances. And we do a lot of training, a lot of mentorship to see those 3 things come together to maximize your chances that you can get in and through to someone like Jason Palmer.
Those are great 3 to focus on. I would say those are definitely the right 3 for the seed stage to sort of ace the test in the seed stage. To answer your question from earlier, we look for every 100 companies we invest in about 2. So we have a slightly lower acceptance rate than Stanford or Princeton or those universities that only accept 4%, I think is what they're accepting these days. So it's very hard to get investment from new markets. And it's because in addition to the 3 that John mentioned, I'm going to add 3 more. Number 1, there really is a way that I can see, or that our firm can see, that this company could get to $30 million in revenue. And we figure that out by looking what's the total addressable market. If every school purchased this, if every think about like Instructure, for example, or Parchment was just acquired yesterday for $800 million. Like that's a really interesting solution for digitizing transcripts and credentials. And they have gotten to, approximately 70% of the market, and they're above 100 million in revenue. And, not every company can get to 100 million in revenue. We're not even looking for that. We're just looking for can you get to 30 million in revenue. The second thing that we're looking for is they're a founder problem fit. Like, do you really have special knowledge about how to solve this particular core problem that is being, whether it's financial aid, for example, we have a company called Regent Education that digitizes financial aid, and they've built an exceptional solution. And all the people that are running that company have been deep in financial aid for many, many years. They know all kinds of things about so many acronyms of different types of financial aid for different scenarios that it makes my head spin. But those are exactly the kind of things that you need to know if you're going to sell a large university on kind of ripping out their old heart of financial aid and putting in a new financial aid management system that pulls down billions of dollars in scholarships and financial aid. And then the third thing is really understanding that quantitative renewal cycle. So by the time you get a seed investment, it needs to have evidence of impact. It needs to have this whole model. You need to build out a fantastic product like John was talking about. By the time you get to me, they have to have renewed. So your customers are delighted the first time they tried it, and then they renewed for a second time. And now they actually know what their quantitative goals are that will qualify for success. Very, very difficult to achieve all of that. But the companies that do are really changing the world in a big way. So you can do that too.
Absolutely. I just echo very quickly that NRR is the new ARR, right? So we used to come into a meeting with new markets and say, what is your annual recurring revenue? Now we're thinking about net recurring revenue, which is a function not only of annual recurring, but also renewals, upsells, cross-sells, and being able to demonstrate that there are other ways to generate revenue over time. And we're now coming up with formulas that say, if you hit NRR in this and that way, you're maximizing your chances of being able to push through a Series A investment.
It's funny how the knowledge kind of like seeps across the system over time. So
the secret sauce, right, Jason?
Exactly. Well, we're trying to make it less secret. So demystify the whole process of building a successful EdTech company.
Well, and I really appreciate this rich and insightful discussion. These are great tips and ideas for those looking to break into and scale evidence-based EdTech in the post-secondary market. So thank you both again so much for your time today. And I'd encourage those who are interested to learn more about the Postsecondary Teaching with Technology Collaborative to visit our website at postseccollab.org. Thank you both for your time.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Jessica.